We're going to get going here. Welcome everybody to the big book study that we're doing. Janine and I, thank you very much for coming.
We do not represent any 12-step fellowship. We are here to share how the literature and the directions contained within the big book have transformed our lives in every way. We are here to share our experience with our own journey through the steps, what the steps mean to us, and how we have seen the steps change the lives of the many we have worked with. The main focus of this study is to show people how the design for living can work in anyone's life when the literature is understood, and more importantly, applied in a practical way. What this looks like in everyday interactions and how the small moments and choices are what add up to an amazing new quality of recovery, relationships, and life satisfaction.
And we're going to start with some prayers. Thank you everybody for coming. Kahu, Kisakam Pisam, Neil Gate Wasin, Xana Buyutan, Okaima, Ai Victor Magano, Creator. Here are our prayers today. Creator, I thank you for a beautiful, beautiful day today, for a beautiful weekend and my life that's beautiful. I can't believe it sometimes, how simple it is and how beautiful it is. Creator, I ask for your guidance today and allowing everybody on screen and in this room to open their mind, open their heart for a new experience with you, with their fellows, with this book and the program, and themselves, so they might be able to let something go and learn something new, so we can have a new experience with all of those things, Creator. I ask for your guidance in helping the alcoholic and people suffering the spiritual malady, that you guide them and let them see that light that you shine. I ask personally, Creator, for your guidance today in words and experiences as we thread this literature into our lives and try to bring it to our friends in a good way that they may be able to grow closer to you. And I'm just so grateful to be here and thank you for my life, Creator. Hi. Thank you, God, for opening.
God, thank you for helping me to continue to show up even though things feel really rocky, and continuing to have faith even when things are really uncertain, and for friendships that allow me to be who I really am and that they're safe enough that you can be all of who you are and work through things together and grow, and for this fellowship of people like that we have each other to go through the days in life, because life is uncertain, but we have an anchor with you, and we get to share that together. Help me to articulate my thoughts tonight and have the words and the stories to share as they come up and as they're needed. Amen.
Okay, we're going to get started. We Agnostics. This is my favorite session, like one of my favorite sessions of like all of the big book studies or any sponsorship that I do. Once we hit this part of the book and then we move forward, like I fucking love this stuff that we're doing here.
All right, so middle of 48. The reader may still ask why he should believe in a power greater than himself. We think that there are good reasons. Let us take a look at some of them. The practical individual of today is a stickler for facts and results. Nevertheless, the 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they are firmly grounded in fact. We have numerous theories, for example, about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Simply because it is impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption as a starting point. Everybody nowadays believes in scores of assumptions for which there is good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. And does not science demonstrate that visual proof is the weakest proof? It is being constantly revealed as mankind studies the material world that the outward appearances are not inward reality at all. To illustrate, the prosaic still grinder is a mass of electrons whirling around each other at incredible speed. These tiny bodies are governed by precise laws, and these laws hold true throughout the material world. Science tells us so. We have no reason to doubt it. When, however, the perfectly logical assumption is suggested that underneath the material world and life as we see it, there is an all-powerful guiding creative intelligence. Right there, our perverse streak comes to the surface and we laboriously set out to convince ourselves it isn't so. We read wordy books and indulge in windy arguments, thinking we believe this universe needs no God to explain it. Were our contentions true, it would follow that life originated out of nothing, means nothing, and proceeds nowhere. Instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, we agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end of all. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? We who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. We have learned that whatever the human frailties of various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose to direction and direction to millions. People of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about. Actually, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices when we might have observed that many spiritual-minded people of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness, which we should have sought ourselves.
Okay, so we're gonna go back to 48 for a little bit here. First paragraph that Janine started reading, or the second one actually. We have numerous theories, for example, about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of a doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Simply because it is impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption as a starting point. So back up at the top of the page, we have, we read this part last week and we talked about it in a context. I'm going to go back to it. I'm going to talk about it in a similar context, but a little different. We often found ourselves handicapped. Think about that. We find ourselves handicapped, meaning we can still do something, but we can't really do it to the best of our ability. And part of the handicap that we get ourselves into, we don't even know we're handicapped, right? Because you can only know what you can know. And what's more important than what you know?
You don't fucking know.
What you don't fucking know, right? So often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, which is stubbornness. So we have all these old ideas that we're just born into. And then we fucking hold true to just this belief no matter what it is. And you can use your own life and think about what areas you've been stubborn in, or when people have said you're so stubborn and you don't think you are because you think you're fucking open-minded, right? Everybody's open-minded. That's one thing that I've learned. Everyone thinks they're open-minded. Fuck, hardly anyone really is though. But everyone thinks they are, right? Sensitiveness and unreasoning prejudice. So part of that is like the unreasoning prejudice. You will judge something to be a certain way without actually knowing the facts. Contempt prior to investigation. So you hold yourself in ever living ignorance, and you don't actually know the truth about what it is. You just think you know based on what little information or no information it is. Like for me, I'll use my own self for an example and my own culture. So I grew up in Calgary. I'm First Nations, as you can see, half. And I grew up in Ogden. And there was some First Nations people in my city, but I heard what everybody else heard. I saw what everybody else saw. So I had a deep prejudice against my First Nations brothers and sisters. And I thought that they were drunks and alcoholics and they didn't work for their money. And, there's that joke, how do you hide a paycheck from an Indian? You hide it under his work boots. I thought that was a fucking great joke and it made lots of sense. But I'm running my whole life on this ignorant theory of what I think I know about them. But I'm only limited to what I know because the information that I'm getting is very fucking limited, right? And then what happens, I become a drug addict. I fucking go up north after I lost my business and I'm living up north and I work with this guy. He's a young guy, 25 years old. And I thought I was super smart, right? I'm the guy who had the binder from the big company and said, go build this fire hall. So I'm building a fire hall in a remote reserve way up north in Alberta, up by Peerless Lake. And I have this guy who's my helper. and he's 25, and we work together. And I'm like trying to school him, like, dude, what are you doing in 6 months? What are you doing here? What are you doing there? What are you doing with your life, bro? Like, you got lots of potential. Do something. And he looks at me and he's like, I don't really think like that. I don't really live like that. But his accent's really thick, right? And it's a First Nations deep accent, right? He speaks the language fluently.
What are you doing?
He says, I just think about, like, right now. He's like, I know I'm going to pick strawberries with my daughter tomorrow, and I'm going to go find these eggs in the swamp with my son on Saturday. And we'll bring this food home to cook them and to my wife, and they'll make food. And then I'll just hang out with my family. And then in that moment, it just hit me just like a ton of bricks. It was just like a hammer on my skull. Here I am thinking I'm schooling this guy and teaching him something, but really he's the one teaching me. I'm living for everything in the future, missing all the beauty of the forest right here, right now. And he's actually present in his life and living and enjoying his family and loving his kids. Meanwhile, I'm up north, not with my kids, fucking smoking crack, being a fucking idiot, thinking I'm fucking smart, making all this money. And I was just a fucking idiot. So part of the story is, so then what I did after I started learning a few things working with this guy up there, I pulled out books and I started looking up the history of First Nations people and what happened. And honestly, it fucking changed my whole thought of life. Once I understood actually what has happened since when Christopher Columbus came and all the fucking events that have happened to get First Nations people to where they are today, not just residential schools either. I'm talking about a whole bunch of fucking shit all the way along. No wonder our people are so fucking hurting. No wonder they fucking drink and use drugs. And then my judgment turned into compassion because I lived in a state of ever living ignorance or arrogance or whatever the fuck it was. And I started really trying to learn about my people that I didn't understand, right? And I'll finish with this. My dad has this saying, right? He taught me this saying. And he says, a white man will talk to you to get to know you. Think about that. Most people are going to chat you up, get to know you, right? He said an Indian will get to know you to talk to you. And I was like, holy fuck, is that ever true? Because they're soft and they're gentle and they want to get to know you first, right? And it was amazing. So I guess the point is that I lived in that state of ignorance for so long. And we have these theories and we believe them without a murmur of a doubt. But they hold us in a box where we can't grow and we think we're open-minded. I always thought I was open-minded for everything. But I realized looking back, I was actually open-minded to very little. And I always say it's not what you don't know that's going to kill you. You all come here trying to learn something and find out something. It's not what you don't know that's going to kill you. It's what you think you know for sure, but it's just not true. Right? So that's important. Want to add to anything?
That I do. So I was just thinking about a phone call that we had, I don't know, quite a bit ago. And I was calling Bill for a question to help somebody who I felt stuck. And I was saying, you know, this is going on, that's going on, and they're reacting like this. And I don't even remember the context, but he blew my mind. Like he's like, hey, go to We Agnostics. You got to talk about this. You got to talk about that. And he started here. And he started with that, and then he went on one of his should have been recording it because it was so good. And it was all about like these old beliefs and taking things too personally and how that gets you stuck. And so as a result of that phone call, this part of We Agnostics really has informed the way that I work with others, especially around like these old beliefs. So like I talk about that quite a bit with people getting stuck in the old beliefs. And so in this context right now, it's talking about this as it relates to our belief in God and what's handicapping us from a belief in God. But I found that this is applicable every time that I'm working with someone stuck on a defect. So I can bring it back to like, they're either taking shit way too personally and it's not about them at all, or it is, and they need to really make a change, or they have to do something different and stop being a baby about it. or they're stubborn and they don't want to make a change because they think that they're right, and they think they're right because of an old belief or an old idea that they're holding on to, and they don't even have an open mind to listen to it. And so I was thinking that right now while we were talking, and then I was thinking about yesterday so Bill and I, over the break, we were really busy and we didn't connect as much as we used to, like were before Christmas and that season. So we had to make a point to connect this last week a couple of times and just catch up and get current. And because it was like, you have to do that with your relationships. If you stop praying, you feel it. If you stop your friends, you're gonna get disconnected and feel it. So anyways, we spent some time yesterday just talking and catching up, and I've been using this little questionnaire with Sponsi. It's a little personality test, right? And I get them to talk it out as they're making their decisions of like, do you avoid phone calls? And I'll get them to talk everything out. And so I did it thinking I was Bill, and I came up with something different than he actually was. And I learned some things. Like I learned that he isn't as extroverted as I thought, for example, but he does that. So that would be like, he will face fear and go talk to people, or he will get out of his comfort zone, or if he doesn't feel like talking, he'll go do it anyways, right? So this is how this program changes people. Like, and one of the things that we talked about specifically was about him being stubborn, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm not stubborn. I'm like, what? I'm like, you are so stubborn. He's like, yeah, people tell me that, but no, I don't see it at all. I'm like, oh my God. And so I thought, I'm so thankful that this man has a program that he believes in, because it was like, and I have noticed that, like I know that, and the lesson in this, the delivery, right? So if I preach at him, or if I tell him an idea without explaining it, he will be like, nope. And I was like, geez, like, he didn't even hear me out. And it took me a bit to catch on, like, okay, I gotta actually explain myself and like blend it into like what he's doing, what I want to do, and like why would it make sense? And he will listen. And then so I'll say these things, and now he'll go, I heard you, and I will think about it. And I love that. But no, like it actually means like he was listening and he will think about it. And so it depends on how I approach him, to the degree of stubbornness that I get back, right? So I think that everybody can be willing to listen if you approach it in the right way. So if I'm coming at him like a bulldozer with these ideas, and I'm not explaining myself properly, or I'm preaching, or I'm whatever it might be, of course he's going to be shutting down, and in the same way that we would when it comes to like religion. So I found that this particular line is so helpful, and in the approach is everything as well.
Okay, perfect. Am I stubborn? Fuck. You got some work to do. Anyway. Okay, I just want to skip ahead here down to the middle of 49. We read wordy books and indulge in windy arguments, thinking we believe this universe needs no God to explain it. Were our contentions true, it would follow that life originated out of nothing, means nothing, and proceeds nowhere. Instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, underline those two lines. Some of my favorite shit in this book right here. We agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end of it all. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? So it's saying instead of regarding ourselves, so the book is kind of telling us, Bill W. is telling us, and I don't even believe Bill W. wrote this book by himself. Let's be clear. I believe God had a hand in this, because this book was written so quick, and there's no way Bill W.'s intellect or experience could have written this book to the depth that he wrote it in the short time that he wrote it. I believe God had a hand in writing this book. So God is saying, instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, he's saying, be one. Be an intelligent agent. What the fuck does that even mean? Does anyone even ever talk about that line? Fuck no. An intelligent agent means somebody who collects information. Be one of those collectors of information. Why? So you can be a spearhead of God's ever advancing creation, he says. That's what he wants us to be an intelligent agent. Collect information. Go through your life. Grow in understanding and experience and effectiveness. You know, in step 10, where it says our next function is grow in understanding and effectiveness. To me, step 10 is step 3. To me, step 10 is where you fucking take the decision of step 3 and now you apply it into your life. It's not by mistake. It says that there, right? That you're entering into the world of the spirit. Your next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. That's what it's saying. Collect the data through your experience in life. Try to get rid of what you think is right and who you are, who you think you are, through the process of the 10, and practice love and tolerance. Eventually that becomes your code. And when you think of what is a spearhead, well, a spear, and then the very point of that is kind of what you're trying to be like the loving entity of your God and bringing that into God's ever advancing creation and being that. And when you look at all the principles of this program, you have 12 principles, 12 traditions with principles, and 12 concepts with principles. And if you dumped all of those into a funnel and you had it all come out in one, it would just be love. That's it, right? So when the big book talks about the word attitude, and you'll see it, and it's in this chapter, with this attitude, you cannot fail. It's talking about love, where it says God, you know, the most profound result of all was their change in their attitude towards God. Because God is not the idea of what you think it is, maybe in your early stages of conceptualizing God or whatever you might think it is. It becomes love. The change in your attitude of what you think God is, because it's love. That's everything we're supposed to try to work towards. But we need to get rid of what isn't God first, what isn't love. And we act in most of what isn't love. And this book is trying to take away the ideas and the beliefs and the notions of what we think life is and remove them. Trying to get back to God as we understood him. When did we understand God? When we were little and we didn't fucking have any beliefs or ideas and we were just love. And, you know, little kids aren't really prejudiced against little kids on their own. If they didn't have parents in society teaching them that this kid's different than this kid and this kid, they would just all be fucking cool with each other. But they learn that shit. And then the kid who's getting picked on starts getting fractured through his journey of life. And he starts developing coping mechanisms. He starts developing these ideas and he starts trying to protect himself. And the kid who's doing the bullying is developing his own validation techniques. And so everyone's fucking going through life fracturing themselves to the point where fucking they get into 40, 50, 60 years old. And what happens? Most people go through midlife crisis. They don't even know what the fuck's happening. So what does somebody who's in a marriage and midlife crisis do? They fucking get rid of their husband and their wife and everything else, and they go and buy new cars and new boats and get younger girlfriends, and they're still fucked. So that shit doesn't work. Because it's all based on a spiritual malady, and we're talking about a lot of normal people, right? They're still really sick. So that's what we're trying to be, Matt. So to me, when that line clicked into me like years ago, I wanted that. And I just tried to do that. And that's what I still try to do. And I don't think that I can just do it because I want to. I think I follow the directions in the book, and the result is that is kind of what happens. And there's proof of what I'm saying all through this book, and I can fucking show it to you. The reason I love doing big book studies is because I can fucking talk so much. I can right, but I can explain a line that has so much meaning in it, so that meaning transmits itself into the other lines and the other parts of the book, so that people can see how this actually works, right? Because that's kind of what needs to be done in a lot of cases, because everyone thinks it's just so linear because our minds want to think like that. But none of it's like that, really, right? So as you can see, I get pretty worked up when it comes to this God shit. Anything? So just kind of going down this other paragraph here below that, we who have traveled this dubious path beg of you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. We have learned that whatever human frailties of various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. People of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about. Actually, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices, when we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness which we should have sought ourselves. That was me to a fucking T. I used to see religious people that drive by a church and I would dissect them and I would fucking condemn them. And my kids would be in the truck with me and I would tell them the same shit. And I was breeding contemptuous kids that grew up to the point where I came into recovery and I'm in my second year and they're like, what the fuck are you talking about God for? You fucking hated God, you hypocrite. So I was just breeding what I was, and it was wrong, but I didn't know any different, right? I only knew what I knew. My kids only knew what they knew. So that's really important, right?
Instead, we look at the human defects of these people and sometimes use their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation. We talked of our intolerance while we were intolerant. We talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. We missed the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. In our personal stories, you will find a wide variation in the way that a teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself. Whether we agree with a particular approach or conception seems to make little difference. Experience has taught us that these are matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. There are questions for each individual to settle for himself. On one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. This power has in each case accomplished by the miraculous and humanly impossible. As a celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declared that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude towards that power and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, and happiness, and a sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seemingly futility of existence, they showed the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them. And many of hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, and they present a powerful reason why one should have faith.
Okay. Do you want to start or you want me to go?
You go.
Okay. So I'm assuming most people are okay with the God part, okay? Like this whole chapter is really in many respects designed for taking that agnostic atheist and switching them over. That's not really the main focus of what I'm taking this chapter to be. I wanted to say, let's look at our ideas. Where did the ideas come from? On the top of 50, halfway through that first little paragraph says, we talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. The number of alcoholics and addicts that I talk to on a daily basis that are fucking bitching about other people or other people gossiping and this kind of shit, they're speaking of intolerance. Look at what this person's doing. Like, what a fucking asshole. But then they're doing the exact same thing doing that, right? We speak of intolerant while we're intolerant ourselves. And we can like really get good at manipulating it. We can like judge somebody over here and do that. And then we're kind of doing it on the side over here. But because we have an innate ability to rationalize and justify our own bullshit, we can be okay with that. And I call that false integrity, because we have to lie to ourselves. If you were to peel back the layers of your heart and ask the heart, is that really fucking okay? The heart would say, nope. And that's who you actually are. That's your consciousness. All the rest of the shit is your ego and the shit that you've learned that you think you know. But when you get down to asking your heart if it's right, that's the internal guidance system. And it says, no, it wasn't fucking right. But because we spent our whole lives going through that journey of life fracturing, we built these ideas based in just our ego and our mind. And we think that that's the way life is. And then we wonder why we're in anxiety and why we fucking feel the way that we do. Well, we feel the way that we do because we're dishonoring our own fucking consciousness. And when you dishonor your own consciousness and you talk shit about people, you treat people like shit, you treat yourself like shit, you're going against the power within you that you don't even know that's fucking affecting your whole being. And you can't do that. And when you go against that part of you that fucking you can't go against, you fucking need relief of some sort. The thing with the ego is it never gets the relief that it ever fucking wants. It can't. Because it's based in false integrity, false sense of power. Okay, so going down a bit, bottom of the paragraph or middle of the page. On one proposition, however, these men and women strikingly agreed. So we're talking about the women and men of Alcoholics Anonymous, the first 100, okay? Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than themselves. This power in each case has accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. As a celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. So now this says thousands of men. Now we're talking millions because we're in 2023, right? But I'll just go with what it says here. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. Anyone tell me what worldly means? Pardon me? All around the world? That is a typical fucking answer of what worldly means. And why I'm pointing that out, and nothing against you, is because there's many words in this literature that people just believe what they think they are. So you have an idea of what that means. So you live your whole life thinking that that's what it means. Now think about how many thousands of words that you do that with, or ideas or belief systems, right? Toby, what does it mean? It means non-spiritual, worldly indeed. And when you think, most people are like, fuck, well-traveled. It means well-traveled. We're talking about 1930 fucking 9 here. We're in a war, World War II. Nobody's fucking traveling the world. Right? Worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude, the attitude towards that power, and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. Okay, so what are we talking about? They're saying that these people have come to believe in this power, and they started taking a certain attitude towards this power. So I always talk in the rooms about, is God a theory? If God's a theory, you're pretty much fucked. You're not going to get the benefit of what we're doing here. So the attitude towards that power, are you really giving it everything you got? Are you really seeking out this thing called love? Yeah, right? So you take that attitude towards that power, but you don't take the attitude just because you want to. And to do certain simple things, boom, there it is. There's the fucking action that allows you to take the attitude towards the power. Just because you fucking want the power doesn't mean you get it. You have to do the certain simple things, okay? And then when that happens, there's a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. Notice how he wrote that line, living and thinking. Most of us will sit around thinking, trying to change the way we're living. No, you do the certain simple things, you live those things, and your thinking fucking changes. That's how it works. You can't think your way into good living, you've all heard. You have to live your way into the good thinking. In the face of collapse, despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, they found that new power, peace, happiness, sense of direction flowed into them. This happened when they wholeheartedly met these few simple requirements. Think about those words, Matt. Okay? And where does this happen? In the face of collapse, in despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources. That's where you find this power. Through the black, through the darkness. The thing about going through this journey of recovery is society, here's another belief system. The indoctrination of beliefs in our society of how you should fucking not feel pain is fucking ridiculous. God has given you a body to feel. He gave you a brain to use. He gave you a body. He gave you feelings and emotions. And everything in that world tells us to avoid fucking pain. Creator wants you to experience pain because the pain is actually telling you something. And when you can get in touch with that fundamental idea of God within yourself, you can feel what you're supposed to feel. Like what's the fucking best and worst part about recovery? Feelings. The worst part is you get to feel feelings, and the best part is you get to feel feelings, right? But the learning how to fucking feel them and fucking learn from them is not an easy process. So I just want to highlight, as you guys are going through your journey of recovery, I don't know where everyone's at, but you're going, and it's going to get fucking hard again. It might be easy right now, and maybe it's not easy, but it doesn't matter because it's fucking hard, okay? And if it's not hard at some point, you're doing something wrong. That's the fucking reality. So in the face of collapse, despair, total failure of the human resources, in this chapter later on, it talks about being crushed by a self-imposed crisis you can no longer postpone or evade. Usually that self-imposed crisis is a defective character that you've used as a protection mechanism your whole life, or a relief mechanism to give you some type of relief. But as you stay sober and you get older, you cannot use those things because it's based in fear and the ego. And when you try to fucking live and love in the spiritual world and you're still trying to live in a defect or ego structure that's based in fear, it won't fucking work. And it'll take you to a fucking point, hopefully to your fucking knees, where you're back in the face of collapse and despair of that defect, and you fucking finally let it go and surrender. Sometimes we have those defects, but we only intellectually surrender them. That surrender, just like step one, you had to concede to your innermost self that you were alcoholic. That is the first step of recovery. You have to concede to your innermost self and let that fucking actually go. And the thing that you can't really let go, you don't actually get in the world. So that's why we keep fighting and grabbing and trying to get whatever it is that we want. Let's say it's a relationship. So for those who are still grasping at relationships to try to make you happy, it's because you haven't fucking let go of the things that don't serve you in relationships. Until you learn what it is. And you can't learn what it is by guessing. You have to do certain simple things. You got to do inventory. You got to talk to your pillars. You got to fucking get on your knees. You got to be humiliated. You got to fucking humble yourself through pain. You got to fucking look like the fool. And then you can finally grow up and out of that. And that's not up to you or me or your sponsor to decide. That's up to fucking God to decide when you've cleared it out of your heart. Okay, so when you find that in the face of failure, total failure of their human resources, they found that new power, peace, sense of happiness, and direction flowed into them. So as you remove the shit that's not God, now that power flows into you. And as you, maybe you know, but in step 3, it talks about we felt his power flow into us. Then in step 10, it says that power is there. It is flowing into us now. That's what it's talking about. It's talking about 3, that decision, and the 10, action, right? This happened soon after. They wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. People will fucking struggle for years in this program because they won't meet the few simple requirements and just fucking do what it takes. It's a simple program. It's not easy though. And the more your ego won't let it go, the fucking harder it is and the longer it takes. There's a line in step 7 that says to be willing to work for humility. Takes most of us a long fucking time. A whole lifetime geared to self-centeredness will not be set in reverse at once. Rebellion dogs are every step at first. But for some people, rebellion dogs are every step for a long fucking time. Maybe they never get out of the rebellion dogs. And what are we talking about? We're talking about step 6 stuff. You look at tradition 6. Power, property, prestige. Divert us from our primary purpose. And when you go into the step 6, it's way more than that. That's the shit we're trying to let go. That's the shit we think is going to make us happy, but it never does. So one's confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence. So there's a lot of people that come to this program and they're baffled, like I was. Why the fuck am I here? What's the point? Hey, Toby, remember that? Before you surrendered in the fucking combine? Like, what the fuck's the point? Futility of existence. They show the underlying reasons why they're making a heavy going of life. Fuck. Where do I fucking see that? I get to see the beginning of where I make a heavy going of life in step 4. That's where I get to see the flaws that I'm fucking causing that are in my makeup. The problems we think arise out of ourselves. The problems are within me deep and they arise out of me into these defects of character that come out of belief systems, protection mechanisms, ideologies, emotions, and attitudes that I don't fucking have ever looked at. Right? I've never looked at it. Leaving aside the drink question, because it's not the fucking question. If like drugs are not the question. The drink is not the question. They tell why living was so unsatisfactory. So there's people in the program, in life today, that are living and they're not fucking satisfied. They're not happy. And I can guarantee you they're not doing one thing. And it's many things. Seems like one thing. There's a line in the chapter, Working with Others. Faith alone is insufficient. The idea of God is insufficient. The concept of God is insufficient. To be vital, which means it's important, but it also means giving of life, that vitality. To be vital, it must be accompanied by self-sacrifice, understanding self, sacrificing self, and then it takes you to unselfish constructive action. Step 10 is the epitome of understanding self, but you got to be fucking aware, and then you got to be willing, and then you got to do what's fucking hard. Not everyone's willing to do that. So they fucking suffer. Why? Because they fucking run their life with the best of intention. And they don't really follow a process. They follow the theoretical idea of what they think the process is. I was at a step 10 meeting last night. It was on step 10. I got asked to open the meeting and I shared exactly what I'm sharing right now, just in like a fucking 4-minute version. And I even said, the old timers all tell you it's fucking promptly admitting that you're wrong and go make an amend. Okay? You are fucking acting in self when you promptly admit that you're wrong and you go fucking make an amend. That's taking humility to be a long time to seek it as something to be desired. The only thing is you don't really know that you're going the long way around because you've been taught an idea in the room that is actually not taking you to the place where the fucking contentment is. Right? So it's important for us. That's why I love these studies, to carry the message of the book and what these words are saying, because I think if you misconstrue what step 10 is, and you think it's a nightly inventory at night, like treatment centers tell you it is, which it fucking isn't, you'll do nightly inventories for the rest of your life and fucking miss self in the moment. And you won't be vital. Won't fucking give you life. So it's important for us. Even though you might be one person out of 100, carrying that message doesn't fucking matter. Why? Because we're a fucking spearhead. We're the fucking pointy part, and we go through and we pierce whatever the fucking bullshit is. And then what happens? People fucking listen. Why? Because you're talking from your fucking heart. You're not talking bullshit. You're not the sheep. Man. Right? So leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how change came over them. when many hundreds, thousands of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God today. Fucking step 10 is presence, man. That's what step 10 is, the presence of God. May you find him now. Why does it say that? Because you don't find him 10 minutes ago or in 10 minutes. God only exists right here, right now. That's why in step 10, you bring him in now, right? The most important fact of their lives. They present a powerful reason why one should have faith. Like real faith, not vitality, right? Anyway, that's all I got.
So this few simple requirements thing, I think like you have to not be using God as a pinch hitter. You have to be willing to try this in all of your interactions and in all of your decisions. So I see sponsees that in the small decisions will run the show. Can I use the example?
I saw you look here.
I just got it. I just got it. So, so Crystal is amazing. She's and very self-reliant. And so when she calls for a step 10, it's like way after the fact of what's gone on. So she called, she's had some good ones, but she called me the other day and she's like, yeah, I really work on my defects. She tells me this story about a toothache that she just let go and go and go. And the effort of this toothache for her to self-remedy, and it's a good example, right? So she was going to the pharmacist and she was talking to the pharmacist and she was getting different kinds of painkillers. She was getting like Ambisol and she was like taking antibiotics and like, she said so many things. I was like, okay, like, first of all, your self-reliance and your self-remedies, your remedies to yourself here are not the easier, softer way at all. And it's so clear to see in hindsight, right? But what we want to be doing is just going to the dentist. That's that looks like it's the harder thing, but like that's a good example of next time something comes out, you got that in your little briefcase to be like, nope, it was not the easier way to just, you know, try and self-remedy.
The pharmacist, the doctor, and the person I saw in emergency all told me the same thing that I needed.
Like we just should have went to the dentist, but it was just like it. I loved it. I loved the example because it was a good metaphor of when we try to self-remedy and we're grabbing outside of ourselves and we're looking for all these other things. In the long run, all we're doing is causing an infection and we're going to end up getting the whole tooth yanked, you know, when that didn't have to be the case. And so it's like, running the show for me, it looked like that at the beginning too. Like I was doing the same stuff where I was only really getting myself into a lot of pain. And then I remembered, oh, right, there's a God I'm supposed to be leaning on. God, I'm in pain. Can you help me? And then I would get relief because I would remember I needed to be doing certain things that I wasn't doing. And those things, I wasn't doing them because they're hard and they look harder in the short term. But in the long term, that's what I'm supposed to be doing for many different reasons, but ultimately because I believe that my God wants me to be happy and effective. I don't think my God wants me to be running around all over the place, wasting time, wasting energy, and ultimately losing a tooth. So it's just a matter of seeing these things come up and in the small moments, choosing to sacrifice whatever it is that seems difficult to whatever it is and trust that that's for your greater good. So it's like, I was trying to explain this to my friend that I talk about sometimes where one day I hope we'll do the steps, but she calls me and she's curious about the steps and I'll explain to her, you know, she's like, well, how do I just go and have a faith in God? And I said, well, that's a good question. Like when I'm trying to explain it to somebody who's not actually in the program, but I do want her to, you know, continue to open her mind. So I'm trying to explain it in a general way. And that is what I came up with, was like the pinch hitter thing where, you know, she will do a lot of her own self remedies and she is constantly reaching outside of herself and she's in more and more pain as the days are going on here. And I believe it's going to come to a head and she isn't able to, and hopefully she'll watch our podcast that I'll send to her and she'll be like, oh my God, that's me. But I hope that she will be able to get to a place that, because I said, you got to look for the coincidences. That's how I came to believe, is that I was like, okay, I'm willing to think that there's something else, right? I'm willing to think there might be a higher power. And then I have to remember to look at the coincidences. And that is the exact thing of when something comes up, oh, here I was about to do whatever I would have done in the first place. And I need to do something different. And then I will be able to see things lining up and the answers come to me in a different way. So it's kind of like a matrix when I'm explaining it to people, and it makes me thankful that I have the steps and people who have experience coming before me, because it really is a challenge to try and explain, what my God is to me. And I don't think that that's even helpful, but how I work it in my life is even hard when I don't have somebody who's also using the steps. And I want to be able to share that there's a spiritual solution. So it's been interesting trying to do that and navigate it, but it helps me come up with different ideas around what I've actually been doing. And that's like not doing what I used to do and looking for the ways that there's coincidences. And when I see them, it's usually asking me to do something I wouldn't have normally done, and then doing it and then hoping that it works out. And that's how we come to believe, is by doing those things, by taking a risk on the coincidences.
Perfect. Yeah, go ahead, take it away. Second paragraph, 51.
The world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than in all the millenniums which went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. Yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Some of the contemporaries of Columbus thought that a round earth was preposterous. Others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies. We asked ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print of the account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? Potomac, thank you. Was it not true that this was the best mathematical minds had proved man could never fly? Had not people said that God had reserved this privilege to the birds? Only 30 years later, the conquest of air was almost an old story and airplane travel was in full swing. But in our fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of our thinking. Show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he will say, I bet they do it, maybe not so long either. Is not our age characterized by an ease with which we have discarded old ideas for new, by the complete readiness with which we throw away our old Therian gadget which does not work for something new which does? Had we not to ask ourselves why it shouldn't apply to our human problems, the same readiness to change our point of view? We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether or not we should see the newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance on the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did.
Too much Kool-Aid. Okay, back on 51. And where Janine started, halfway down that paragraph. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. The realm of the material. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered. It's important. By superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Some of the contemporaries of Columbus thought round earth preposterous. Others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies. So it's kind of alluding to the ideas or beliefs that they had back in these early days And they're like, they're going to kill these guys for these new ideas. Columbus, round earth, fuck, are you fucking, he's going to kill this guy for having this idea, right? Nowadays, it's a flat earther that we want to kill. But others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical hearsays. One of the most famous guys ever in our history for, his astrology and, his knowledge of the universe. Back then they thought he was probably a witch or something, and they wanted to, do bad things to him, right? And that's because they were fettered by all sorts of fixed ideas. Think about the fixed ideas you're embedded with in our society here today. Right? I always say, like, most of the ideas that we have today in our lives aren't even actually ours. Why? Go ahead. This means like littered. Your brain is littered with all sorts of ideas, fixed ideas.
Let's see.
Yeah, get it.
It is a chain or manacle used to restrain a prisoner, typically placed around the ankles. Kinky.
There's different.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
fetters. It's this.
No, it's not.
Read the sentence. Fettered, chained to the ankles. Prisoned.
Could be.
Okay.
Well, fuck, I don't know.
Wikipedia has it wrong.
In that context, does it really matter?
It's the Oxford Dictionary.
Okay, but that, if it does mean that, that's good. Okay, because maybe it's right, and that's cool. Anyway, so we asked ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased, unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as what ancients were about the realm of the material? Even in this present century, American newspapers were afraid to print the account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. So this newspaper doesn't want to print the fucking truth about the Wright brothers' first successful flight ever. Why though? Well, because had not all efforts at flight failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go down to the bottom of the Potomac River? Professor Langley was actually given millions of dollars by the government to build a flying machine. Whereas the Wright brothers built their own using their bicycle parts, right? So they weren't supposed to be the ones that built this machine. So there's all these reasons why the newspapers wouldn't really want to print the first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. So the newspapers are in a belief that, they're just going to lie because it shouldn't be that way, right? Was it true that the best mathematical minds proved that man could never fly? Had not people said God reserved this privilege for the birds? Only 30 years later, conquest of air was in an old story, and airplane travel was in full swing. Basically, what it's saying is, that happened, we forgot about it, now we've moved on with this new idea. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed the complete liberation of our thinking. Shoney Longshoreman, a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket. He say, I bet they do it, not so long either. Before that, 100 years or 50 years before that, rocket to the moon expedition, people would have thought that was fucking crazy. That's never going to happen. Like, what planet are you from? And then, they do it, and it's not going to be too long either. And it happens, right? Just how quickly we can change our mind. That's like what it's saying. Like, we get so locked in an old belief pattern, and then really we don't have to be there. We can change it if we want. I bet they do it, maybe not so long either. Is not our age characterized, and this really is fitting for today, by the ease of which we discard old ideas for new ones, by the complete readiness to change, readiness which we throw away the theory or the gadget that does not work for something the new that does. And we can think like this phone. Like, you tell me this phone does all these different things, right? It can start my car. It can shut off the lights in my apartment. It can, maybe I can even work from home on it and just go to work and I'm just on my phone. Like, then you give me a new phone that does a whole bunch of new stuff, and I just throw this one away because I believe this new one, right? And I don't even give it two thoughts because that's the age that we live in. But we had to ask ourselves this: why shouldn't we apply to our human powers the same readiness to change our point of view? Am I going to rely on self-sufficiency and doing the things that I've always done? Why shouldn't I just give God a chance? Let's try something different and just see, right? That's what it's saying. To our human problems, the same readiness to change our point of view. And I always like people to put little markers on these 8 step 0 promises. I call them step 0 promises because these are the promises that you get by not working any steps. These are the promises you come into the program in, and these are why you drink. When we talk about the unmanageability of step 1, here it is right here. So I'm just going to quickly go through. If anyone wants to make a note on 1, 2, 3 up to 8, you can. 1, we were having trouble with personal relationships. Little baby number 1 there beside we. We couldn't control our emotional natures. Little baby number 2 there beside we. We were prey to misery and depression. Little number 3 beside we. We couldn't make a living. Little number 4 beside we. We had a feeling of uselessness. Little number 5 beside we. And number 6 beside we were full of fear. And the number 7 beside we were unhappy. Little baby number 8 beside we couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. So when I take somebody through the book, depending on who they are, but typically I do this a lot. I'll start right here in my first session of the We Agnostics chapter. And I'll be like, I want you to tell me if this is a check mark. If you have this in your life right now, it's a check mark. So I'll start reading this. You're having trouble with personal relationships. They go, check. Couldn't control your emotional natures. Check. We're a prey to misery and depression. Check. Couldn't make a living. Check. Sometimes they don't have that one checked. Okay. Some people come into the program and they're still able to make money. That one check mark that they don't have will keep them out of this program for a long time, sometimes forever, because people will not come here if they still are able to make money. People will not give this program its full benefit and do the things that are required if they're able to still make money. So sometimes when an alcoholic's new and they're barely hanging on to their job with the thread, and I see that they're on their way to losing that job and they already have all the other 7 check boxes, but they're still able to make a living, I am hoping and praying they lose their job. And they're trying to hold on to that job with everything because it's the last thing they got, right? But they don't see what I've seen, that they need to lose that job and get down to that low level of humility where you're fucking humiliated. From there, from that collapse and despair of that darkness, they can find that new power, peace, and sense of happiness. It's almost like they stop their own bottom because they won't let go of that job. And it's really sad because some people will never let go of that job. They do this program half-assed and they never really get the connection of God that they could have had if they just would have given up the job, or if alcohol would have just totally taken it away. And it's really sad, but that's the way it is. And what I want to highlight here is when it talks about couldn't control our emotional natures, that can be a number of different things, right? That can be you cry for no reason, or you get angry for no reason, or you have like bouts of anxiety for no reason. Various emotional disturbances that kind of come up on you without you even really being aware, and they just kind of take over your being in those moments, right? And those are not being able to control your emotional natures. Is there any other ones I'm missing?
No, but I was just gonna add that the not being able to control the emotional natures also looks like not being able to just sit in an emotion without having to grab outside of yourself for relief.
True. Okay, good point. This one I love. We were prey to misery and depression. When you look up the word prey and look how it's spelled, P-R-E-Y, we were prey to misery and depression. Look up the word prey and it says an animal that hunts and stalks another to kill and eat. I love that definition because that's what happens. misery and depression will hunt and stalk you, try to eat you and kill you. And most people, when they die from this illness, it's due to misery and depression. Because that depression and anxiety have preyed, or the morbid reflection, or sometimes it's even the resentment still. And the resentment breeds the victim mentality, and the resentment to the victim mentality, and it's morbid reflection still, right? The inability to forgive somebody. And usually why is that? Because the person still thinks they're the victim. And they can't get past being the victim. And how do you get past being the victim? You got to do certain simple things, right? You got to start chairing meetings. You got to get out of your fucking way. Like, and why I talk about people in victim, morbid reflection, depression, because those pride and reverse defects, they're the most destructive ones. They're the ones that take you down and they fucking hold you, and then you feel like you're okay, you're allowed to be in that. But they're actually really destructive. And the only way to get out of those is to get out of yourself. The person that lives in those, though, they want to do inventory. It's more inventory, it's more inventory, it's more inventory. You will inventory yourself to the fucking end of a barrel of a gun. Because you can't inventory yourself to death. And another thing I'll point out, since we're talking about it, because people won't do all the components of this program, they will try to do inventory till the cows come home, and you can only inventory so fucking much. Inventory becomes selfish. You can't do inventory constantly because it's your in self at some point. There's a balance to everything, right? You can't always see the balance. And people will think that because they're looking for the flaws in themselves because they want to feel so good, so bad, that's why they don't feel so good, so bad, because they're trying to fucking hold on to it so tight that you can't let it go. Does that make sense?
Like in the example that we were just talking about with Crystal and the dentist, she knew, like she knew while she was in it that she should go to the dentist, right? But instead, so she didn't need an inventory to know that she was acting in self, but she just continued to act in self, and inventory wouldn't have fixed that.
There's no noise.
You had to take a different action.
Go ahead.
Are you referring to doing too many sets of steps?
Yeah,
Step 4 and 5, or are you referring to step 11?
all of it. It can all be selfish. Some people come here, they do a set of steps. They don't want to sponsor. They don't understand what fucking step 10 is because the rooms are giving them that bunk version of a nightly inventory or promptly admitting that they're wrong. So they go along life being wrong. And what do? They go make these amends without consultation of God or a sponsor. It's still based in self. They never get the relief that they're looking for. So they do more steps. They fucking switch from one sponsor to another. They look for the next sponsor who's going to take them to the promised land. And they never feel good. They don't find that vitality because they're stuck in the self. Go ahead.
And so what are they missing in the steps? Just to
They're
summarize
missing the knowledge of step 10 and the discipline of what step 10 is, because without step 10 worked properly, step 11 doesn't work properly. But the thing with us is because we have the egos and we don't want to be separated and we want to think that we're doing good, we will convince ourselves that we're doing everything to the optimum. And most people, I'll say, out of a 0 to 10 of what step 11 can be, most people only max step 11 out at a 1 or a 2, right? 10 or 20% of what it actually can be. Why? Because they're not acting in their step 10 properly. So, and then the other thing for some people who won't sponsor, and sponsoring sucks for us all when we start. Like, let's be fucking serious here. I didn't like them fucking with my time. I didn't like my phone ringing when I was doing something I wanted to be doing. Like that's the reality of sponsorship. It's a pain in the ass when you first start. The thing is it's not an option. If you want to really grow in your own self-discovery and fucking letting those old ideas go, it's a necessity. You want to grow closer to God, you got to open your heart to somebody across the table from you. Look at yourself, listen to yourself, because that's really what it is, right? And it doesn't happen over 1 or 2 guys or 10. Fuck, I've done this for like, I've sponsored 10 guys. None of them respect my time. I'm out. Like, that's self, man. Like, the thing about sponsorship that people don't get is you got to go through the shit, man. You got to cut your teeth. Like, me and Janine were talking, right, outside tonight. And she's like coming up on 2 years. And she's like come a long way for somebody that's 2 years. Like, she's fucking like, you know, I don't want to give her too much props, but like, let's say 5 years of somebody working a solid program, right? My opinion, probably because of her schooling, a lot of it's her schooling, and a lot of it, she seeks high water level recovery, and she seeks people who are fucking going to call her on her shit, and she takes it well. I'm not the only one. There's other pillars she has that call her on her shit, right? Her sponsor's pretty amazing too. I don't know her, but you got to do the sponsoring thing, or at least service.
But yet schooling and being around people who are calling me on my shit, but also sponsoring.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
that's what we were really talking about
Yeah.
over the weekend, is just like it just the sponsoring that I've been able to do and honored to do, really, like it's pushed me, because every woman that I get to spend time with in that way, it's like they have just a whole different set of issues that I somehow match. And I'm like I was working with one today, and she had to come over, and I was like, man, I'm like, I see myself in you. I'm like, and this is what I want. This is what I've just been learning. And so I was printing her off some of the stuff that had been helpful for me from, and it wasn't even necessarily 12-step. It was to get organized and calm, but like, it wasn't like doing step work like that. It was like, in the moment, what did we need to get grounded and to get some of the life manageability so that we could get into some more of the work. And it's like, I just see myself with all these women. And so I'm constantly not only reminded, but I get pushed in that direction even more. So I don't know how it would be for me if I wasn't sponsoring. And it's like, it sucks in the way that, like, I feel guilty sometimes. I was at a restaurant with my daughter, and you know, the phone's ringing and it's an SOS, or it's, you know, like it's like, it does take you out of the things that I want to be doing selfishly. I would rather just get through supper. I would rather spend a Saturday without having that responsibility, but I get to have that responsibility, and there's so much more value in it, and so much that I wouldn't have been able to accomplish with Bill calling me out. There wouldn't be. The thing is that the ways that my defects come out today are within the sponsee push, the demand, that the pressure that I'm under to have this responsibility. It pushes me, and my defects start coming out, you know, like yesterday, Bill and I were talking, and he's like telling me about how I need to be more reliable. And he didn't say you need to be more reliable, but we were talking about just some habits that I need to improve on, like, you know, giving my ETA, little communication stuff. And I hate hearing that. And I already feel like I don't have enough time, and it's a lot, right? But it's like, I'm growing because I'm having to be put on these spots where I have to show up, and I can't just bail. And I mean, I could, but I couldn't, you know, like it would be very weird if I was just to bail on where I'm at today. So I have to toe the line, and 95% of the time I love it, but there's the 5% that I'm like, I want to quit, and I'm like, what am I doing this for? And then that's where the growth happens, because I'm at that place. So it's in the places where I'm pushed to my limits and I want to quit that the next level comes, you know? And so I wouldn't get that if I wasn't working with other people. And so it's, if you're not sponsoring and you're scared to, like, talk about that with your sponsor, and what needs to happen so that you can take that on, because you're missing so much of what this program has to offer by not fully acting on that. And there are, like, I feel like I have a friend who, a close friend I went to treatment with, and he got very involved in the service end. So he has a service sponsor and so he's really involved on the back half. And I see a lot of personalities like in there's a committee that I belong to on the service side of things. And I see personalities that perhaps love that more than sponsoring because that's where they're better fit. And we wouldn't have service positions and AA if we didn't have people doing the service positions, right? So that's another way that you get involved in service to keep AA running. And in my opinion, that is also carrying the message in all your affairs, because we wouldn't be able to have a meeting if we didn't have all the service things going on behind the scenes. So if you're not involved with a service group or sponsoring, talk about that with your sponsor. If you don't have a sponsor, get one, but like get more involved in the ways that you can, because that really is like where a lot of great changes can come for you.
Okay, and I just want to touch on when you get pushed to that limit, and this isn't just in sponsorship, this is like in anything you're doing in your life. You get pushed right to that edge, right? And that's what Janine was talking about with the sponsorship topic. In the face of collapse, she wants to give up.
Yeah.
In the face of collapse and despair, total failure of her human resources, this is where she's going to find that new power, that peace and sense of direction flow into her. But that only happens, when she wholeheartedly meets these requirements, like whatever it is at that moment. That's where she's going to get a little closer to God. She's going to get a little more of herself out of the way in that moment.
And when it talks about, like this is a lifelong process, like it says this in the 12 by 12 in step 7, right? And anyways, it says it's a lifelong process. The work's never done. And it's like, well, how can that be true? Well, in this case, I was feeling overwhelmed and I was mismanaging like my scheduling, and I was like trying to do it all myself, like just really trying to, I wasn't asking for help. I wasn't, so I didn't even realize that. So again, this is like new levels, new devils, my same freaking defects coming up, like self-reliance, and then avoiding doing what I need to do, which was to make a change, get organized. I was just, day in, day out, I'm like feeling like more and more like, oh my God, I can't juggle all these balls and more balls are coming. And, so what happens? Of course, I get the self-imposed crisis by my own fucking defects. And then I'm asking for help. And I'm like, I saw him and I was like, oh, I just want to do better, Bill. And he's like, okay, we'll talk about it after roundup. Clean your shit up. No, he didn't say that. But I asked for help, and I ended up talking to a couple of people at Roundup. I talked to Jesse about how do you manage. I got some tips from him. And
what did he say?
Yeah, he said that he does an inventory every Sunday night on the areas of his life, like work and sponsoring, relationship, and he'll literally lay everything out on Sunday. And then he just executes during the week. So he takes the time to set up. And so what I got from that conversation, is that I'm lacking discipline. And that comes up as a theme too, right? Like we are not disciplined by nature as alcoholics. So the discipline of actually sitting down and laying out an inventory, and that would take so much, like the dentist story, that would take so much less effort. It's more in the moment, but it's the easier, softer way in the long term, in the execution of the week, to have it all laid out. So I've made some changes and came through pain, as it usually does. And so I don't know. And if not, I would be humming along. Like I would, I'm sure defects would come in a different way, but they come fast. They come fast and with support when you're doing them in this program like this. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's cruise along, because Janine's taking so much time. Anyway, on these step 0 promises, there's 8 of them. Okay. These are like a barometer of your recovery. Always come back to these step 0 promises, however often, every 2 months, every month, however often you need to. And it's not likely like every single one's going to be always gone, but sometimes they all might be gone. But if you're living in more of them than you're not, that's not a good sign. Because these are the barometer, the aspects of your life that you can look at and go, am I slipping back to old shit? Because these are the reasons that you're going to drink again or live in shit. Go ahead. I guess it's common if it's common to you. That's not common to me. That's not my life. I don't have trouble with personal relationships, very rarely. My buddy Jesse doesn't have trouble with personal relationships, rarely. There's a lot of people I know that don't have a lot of personal relationship issues, bro. So, yeah, life happens and we all exist at different levels. And not all the levels interact and understand each other. But I guess my point to saying that and bringing that to surface is, fuck, maybe it could be better, bro. Like when I work with somebody personally, my job is to get them to level the fuck up to be the best version of themselves they can and not sell out their soul for anything. That's my job. Other sponsors are there to help just mitigate and get people to live and be okay with themselves, kind of, sort of in the world. That's not how I do it. So, you know, that's my take. These are goals for me as a sponsor with the people I work with. Is everyone going to take it there? No. Is everyone capable of it? Fuck, I don't think so. So I don't know.
I think that also speaks to the there's like having a satisfactory life and like, or living in the comfort zone or settling for less, and sometimes a person doesn't realize that there could be better because it's better than where they've come from, or they're, you know, like it's been like, and you say like the good is good, right? So the good is good. But I feel like when I'm saying the good is good, I'm maybe selling myself short where it could be better. And that doesn't necessarily mean break up and leave a relationship, but what could I be doing in my own self to make the relationship a little bit less bumpy? You know, like it always could be better. And so I think there's a danger in the comfort zone. Like the comfort zone's really good, but nothing grows there. So you wanna comfort zones can make you feel like you've got it, but you're actually kind of regressing, because you don't just stay still. You have to continue to try and level up where you get stagnant and you can get uncomfortable. And so you got to be like putting a daily effort. You know, we get a daily reprieve based on, you know, being in touch with our creator or God. So I think that things can always be better. And so it doesn't mean leave the relationship, and life is life, but it can always be improved. And if you are having trouble in the relationship, there can be less trouble. There can always be like, it can always be better. Okay, do you want me to keep reading?
No, Tom, you got anything more on that? But I get it. I get it. And like, I set the bar high, right? And that's just how I am. And I believe a lot of people can have that, man. And like, you know, and like she said, I don't want anyone that I'm working with to sell themselves short. I really don't. And I want them to be the best version of themselves that they can. Some people are more willing than others. Some people's defects pull them back. Some people's victim of a delusion that they can have satisfaction, happiness out of this world is stronger than others. So, you know, everyone is kind of at where they are.
And I think like we go through people stuff, like I
Of
mean,
course.
I have relatives, right? Like where I have issues with, like, I don't have just peaceful relationships because I can only control me. So I have a family member where, like, I mean, it's, I wouldn't say it's peaceful, but I'm at peace with it because I can show up and I can act in my own integrity and I don't leave owing an amends or whatever. So I mean, like when I look at trouble with, because I thought the same thing. I was like, trouble with our personal relationships. Well, I mean, geez, like there's our relationship for sure that I have low hope for. But then I thought, no, like, I mean, I don't have trouble with, like, I'm not the one going around wreaking havoc and making amends. And like, I show up and I just be myself and I act in love and truth. And then I walk away. And if they want to continue doing their thing, that doesn't mean I have trouble with the personal relationships. So there's that too, right? Yeah.
And like, maybe we only have trouble with one personal relationship, because I was in a relationship like for 4 years and I only had trouble with one, and it caused trouble in all the other ones in some ways. But there's a line in 4, it says we ought to take inventory on personal relationships that cause us reoccurring trouble. And then it goes through a whole list of what these reoccurring troubles may be. So for me, I had to constantly take inventory. Was I willing to let that relationship go? Fuck no. Why? Because the broken parts of me were still too hooked into her broken parts. And I couldn't let go. But when I peeled back the layers of truth and I asked my heart, should I be there? My heart said no. But my defects said yes. And I couldn't let it go until I was crushed in that face of collapse and despair. Total failure of my human resources. I finally let it go. I could still be in it. And I could tell myself, yeah, I'm okay, man. But, you know, certain relationships, man, they might need to be looked at. And if all your relationships are like that, maybe the problem's fucking you. Right? Like, take inventory on your life and all your relationships. Are you fighting everyone and everything? What's the common denominator? You, right? And through that, there's humiliation. Because then you're like, fuck, it is me. What about me needs to be changed? Why am I? There's the humiliation. Humbling through pain. Now you got to look at yourself and go, fuck, I don't like this about myself. And then try to change it. But then it's hard, right? Well, fuck, it's simple concept, not easy to do. Let's keep going.
The Wright brothers' almost childish faith.
No.
Yeah,
Where are you?
I'm reading where we're supposed to be reading.
No, I want to talk on one more thing here.
Oh my God.
So at the end of the step 0 promises, it says, was not a basic solution to these bedevilments more important than newsreels of lunar flight? I hate that line that Bill W. wrote. It's like, was not a basic solution to these problems more important than fucking anything? Yeah. I don't want to live these things. What's more important than living these things is living the opposite. I want the opposite of these things. So the basic solution of these things is more important than anything. Of course it is. So when we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea does. That's fucking important, right? So we see these other people solving their problems by the simple reliance upon a spirit of the universe, on God. And we had to stop doubting that power of God. Because our ideas do not work, but the God idea does. That's important. Okay. I'm going to read for a sec, okay? Just because of what's coming up on this next page.
Go ahead.
So the Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Without that, nothing would have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve our problems. So maybe, just maybe, if you're having problems in your life, maybe it's self-sufficiency. But the thing about life is we have the world living in its own self-sufficiency. So in some ways it doesn't make sense. And how do you even bring God into certain aspects of life? It becomes a challenge, right? When others showed us that God's sufficiency worked. So that's kind of what I was saying. Some people have shown me that God's sufficiency can work no matter what. And I see that in some people. And some people, I can see them, they're God sufficient at AA or CA or whatever A they're in. They're God sufficient at certain aspects. Then when they're at work and doing other things, there's no God around. And it's like, how is that? So then they go back to being kind of like the asshole, like the rest of the group on the rig that they're working on. Or they go back to the gossip and work like that, but then they're over here. But they're not really being authentic with themselves. So they got one foot in the spiritual and one in the world of the material. You can't really do that in this game. It's kind of like you're all in, right? So anyway, we begin to feel like those who had insisted the rights could never fly. This is what I wanted to get to. Logic. It's great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. It's not by chance we are given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it more sane and logical to believe than to not to believe. Why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy, we threw up our hands in doubt and said we don't know. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could no longer postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or he is nothing. Either is or he isn't. What is our choice to be? So if you're taking notes, put a note on the side of that, crushed by your own defects of character. Okay? So, arrived at this point, we're squarely confronted with the question of faith. We can't duck the issue anymore. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason towards this desired shore of faith. Okay, what is that saying there? Okay, the bridge of reason, the bridge of logic. We all use logic in our world. Our world is riddled with logic. Okay, and what I want to emphasize here is logic is based in 5 senses only. Okay, you have your eyes, your taste, your touch, your hearing, your smell. You take the world in through 5 senses. It's logic, okay? When you're a baby, you start touching things. Oh, that's hot. Oh, I can cry and my mom comes running to me. So I start doing different things to navigate through life. And I'm using my logic. Fuck, when I cry, my mom brings me anything I want. If I cry louder, she gives me more of that, right? Whatever it is. And there's many examples of this through our life, okay? So logic, it's great stuff. We like it. We still like it. It's not by chance we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses. So you're examining the things outside of you with your 5 senses and to draw conclusions. So you draw conclusions using your 5 senses based on your experience in life, based on your journey of life. Two people see the exact same thing with their senses. They have 2 totally different interpretations of the exact same thing that it looks like, okay? Because of their journey of life. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. So you can use the reasonable approach and interpretation to interpret everything that you see, touch, feel, and examine. Where do we learn everything that we think we know? We learn from the world that we grow up in. A lot of the shit we're learning comes through TV, social media, our parents, school, wherever, okay? But you're only seeing it, touching it, feeling it, smelling it, tasting it. You're listening to other people's versions of whatever that is, and you're indoctrinated into already existing belief systems. And in our society, most of it's fear-driven, okay? It's always like, I need a job or I'm going to lose my house. I need this or I'm going to lose this. I'm always driven by fear. That's what our society breeds. Why? Why? In my opinion, because it needs us to make somebody money, right? So we're also indoctrinated into work for somebody, because if you just go to trade school, and if you just go get a good job, you can have this much money and you can buy this house and you can buy this car and you can do all these things. And we think that that's the pinnacle of fucking life, right? But we're taught that. We're bred into that. Why aren't we taught, like, you know what, you can be anything you want. You can be an entrepreneur. Let's open your own mind. Like in school, when you're in grade 1 or in grade 2, instead of them teaching you what they're teaching you, why aren't they teaching you who you are? You know, you're a good artist, you're a good beater, you're good at this, kid, you're a good dancer, you're a good piano player. No, you got to learn math and you got to learn science. And if you don't get it right, then we're going to shame you and you're going to go into special ed class because you're stupid. And so they're redirecting us in every way that they want us to. And we believe that. Then we grow into this world based on what we think the world is. But it's not actually that, because all of that is only taken in through the senses, and we use reasonable approach interpretation. We build the filters of what we think life is. And it's not, that isn't it. That's not what life is. So as we kind of keep reading, going down, as we became alcoholics, crushed by our own self-imposed crisis, we could no longer postpone or evade. When we first get here, that is alcohol. Okay, I want to fucking stop drinking and using drugs. So I'm willing to give this God thing a shot. But as I stay here longer and I understand and I come to studies like this, and I realize the alcohol and the drugs are not the issue, that it's my defect of character. That I will get crushed by my own self-imposed crisis like I did with that relationship, with my anger, with my lust in year 1, 2, 3. Anger and lust were big ones for me in my first couple years that I had to learn through severe pain. Okay? And like, I'm going to use Alicia a little bit here. Her and I we're like very similar in where she's at right now and where I was at. And because of that pain that she went through, and why I'm doing these studies, why I'm so passionate, because I went through fucking pain, man. And I saw this literature in a way where I'm like, holy fuck. And now I can transmit this literature based through my own painful experiences in a way that makes sense. And I inspire people to don't stop. Don't stop. Go through that pain. Learn what that self-imposed crisis is. What's at the root of that shit? It's not your 4th column in your step 4 any fucking more. It's the 3rd column. Where's the 3rd column taking you? What does 3rd column even mean? No one talks about that, but we will now in meetings. We will with our sponsees, because our little spearhead will help people grow and learn. And I've seen it happen in this program. So as we became alcoholics, crushed by our self-imposed crisis, we could no longer postpone or evade. At some point, you won't be able to postpone and evade it anymore. Maybe it's relationships. Maybe it's resentment. You can hide and you can fucking try to avoid it. You can do all these things. But at some point, you can't put anything between you and you anymore. You can't put anything more between you and you. And at some point, sometimes our service we put into the program, we're putting shit between us and that inventory. Sometimes it can be so many things, right? It's not like just linear. There's so many things. There's balance to this, right? But until you quit putting whatever it is between you and it and look at yourself, like when you were struggling with substances, you put pride in there. You put your girlfriend, blame her. You blame your job. You blame this. You blame that. Your own pride. You can't lose the job. Like I talked about the job earlier. That's still putting me between me and myself. And I can't see myself until I lose that job. And once I lose that job, then I'm crushed by my own self-imposed crisis. I got nothing to hide behind, right? That's why I believe God took all of my actor excuses away from me. I had the $1 million house. I had all the stuff. I had the wife. I had the family. I had the business name. I had it all. And he said, and then I had nothing. And I came here with nothing. And that's when I found that power, that peace, that sense of direction and happiness. But it only has come in like little increments. And I'm getting to a point here. And I know we're going over a little bit, but just hang tight. Janine.
What?
So we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is going to help us with whatever it is we're struggling with, or he's not. And at this point, you fucking better let him try, right? He's nothing, either God is or he isn't. What is our choice to be? Well, by default, we just say he is. But sometimes we don't believe it. Like, how is he going to do this, man? Like, but why I have my faith is because I've really jumped off a lot of cliffs in my recovery where I've taken some big chances and done things that people don't do. So I know for me that God is everything. And I've learned through the literature where I was shy and where I needed to up my game. And I only learned that because I was in the book through sponsorship. Arrived at this point, this line, nobody talks about this next paragraph, super important. Arrived at this point. Arrived at what point? You're crushed. You finally fucking arrived at this point. You are now squarely confronted with the question of faith. You have lost that relationship. You have fucking burnt that last bridge with anger. You have lost your career that you shouldn't be in anyway because God's been shaking the foundation, trying to get you to go somewhere else and help somebody else. You've arrived at that point. You're squarely confronted with the question of God. Are you really going to give it to God now? You can't duck the issue anymore because you've been ducking and avoiding and postponing and evading it, and you can't anymore. It gets to that point. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason. So in my addiction, I can look at and use my reason and look at my life. And I can walk this way because look what addiction does to me. Or maybe it's look what this relationship does to me. Look what my anger does to me. Look what my inability to look at myself truthfully does to me. So we can see, we walk far over the bridge of reason by looking at the logic and reasonable approach and interpretation, examining the destruction, the evidence of my senses of what's happened in my life because of whatever it is. Over towards this desired shore of faith. So I'm walking closer to God. Is it a desired shore of faith? Sometimes I don't know if it's desired, but it's my last option. I don't have anywhere to go, right? The outlines and the promise of the new land. So, and that's kind of like what I'm bringing to you guys. I'm bringing to you the outlines and the promise of a new land. Fucking go into the unknown. Try something fucking different, right? Had brought luster to your tired eyes and fresh courage to your flagging spirits. I get the call when people are fucking desperate. And then I give them that hope and I'm like, no, man, God's got you. And I fucking really, they believe me when I'm done talking to them that God's fucking got a plan for them. And I bring that luster to their tired eyes, that fresh courage to their flagging spirits. And then hopefully their pillars are doing the same thing. Because somebody can leave me and then all of a sudden they're back to the step zero promises right after. But the thing is you can't give up even if you fall back to the step zero. You got to get back onto this and fucking move forward. Because if you move backwards, we got a couple options for you. Death, jails, institutions. Those ones aren't really that appealing. So, bring luster, courage to our flagging spirits. Friendly hand stretched out in welcome. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the fellowships of 12-step fellowships. We stretch our hands out in welcome. Here, man. Fuck, you don't have to do this alone anymore. In what area of your life are you doing it alone? Right? What area are you struggling in? You don't have to. You just got to fucking let it go and put your hand out and ask somebody for some help here. Right? So our friendly hand stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us this far. The reason, using reasonable approach and interpretation, my logic had brought me this far. My own self-sufficiency brought me so far. But somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. It's hard to step from bridge to shore. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on what? Reason. Our defect, that comfortability, that self-pity, that anger, that pride. I don't want anyone to know. And the more time we get in the program, the less we want people to know how much we're struggling because we got it together. And like somebody like myself, like, don't you know? I got to be really diligent and not bullshit myself like that, which is why I have a sponsor. I have to be able to fucking go to somebody and tell them the whole truth and be able to cry. Leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. The thing about that support is it's false because it's based in self. It's based in your defect. And it doesn't actually support you. So stepping from bridge to shore is the goal, and it takes time. So I'll finish with this before I give it over to Janine. As we go through this program, there's a lot of doing, and we have to start building those sober patterns. I got to rely on somebody else's God and believe that they jumped off the cliff and then believe that it might work for me. And if it doesn't, then there's a lesson in there. And there's always a lesson in there. And when this program becomes everything is a lesson in your life, then the whole program changes. But if you're still fucking thinking that life's not treating you right and blah, 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 you know, there's some work to do.
Bill mentioned, if we are at a place where, you know, alcoholics are at that place that where we're getting crushed and there's jails and institutions and death. Well, most of us aren't at that place anymore. And some of us are in a comfort zone. And there's things that maybe intuitively have been on our mind, but logic talks us out of them. And so to get to next levels, you got to take risks. And that's how you get to shore, is you take the risks. So over the next week, if you really sit with yourselves, this is the homework assignment, is to sit with yourselves this week and to really just be praying for God to show you where you need to step out of your comfort zone. What is the risk that you need to take that you're not taking? Yeah, I got you. Okay. So that's what I want you guys to think about. And I'm going to ask a couple of you next week on the break what your comfort zone answers were. So thank you everybody for attending tonight and coming and joining us in person. And thank you for everybody who joined us online. Have a good evening. Take care.